Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money with your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 811 of Screw the Commute Podcast. Can you imagine that? 811 episodes. Boy, I've been running my mouth quite a bit over the years. We're with a really great guy today. His name is Tom Fox. He runs the Compliance Podcast Network, but he's also got some twists to his background that has to do with children I think you'll find interesting. We'll bring him on in a minute. Now, make sure you grab a copy of my automation ebook at screwthecommute.com/automate-free. You will thank me for it if you implement even a portion of what's in this book. We actually estimated that just one of the tips in the book, this is not any kind of hyperbole hype, we estimate it saved me 8 million keystrokes over the years. This is hundreds of hours of time that I was spending with customers and prospects and developing products and services and not fighting with my computer. So make sure you grab a copy of that book and implement it at screwthecommute.com/automate-free. Check out my mentor program at greatinternetmarketingtraining.com. It's the longest running, most unique, most successful ever in the field of internet and digital marketing. And I always triple dog dare people to put theirs up against mine, and they won't because I'm a crazy fanatic and they'll be embarrassed. So check it out. And also follow me at Digital Multimillionaire on TikTok. And also our podcast app is now in the App Store for iOS only. We hope the Android will be soon. And check that out at screwthecommute.com/app. That's APP. All right, let's bring on the main event. Tom Fox has authored 25 books on business leadership, compliance and ethics, and corporate governance. Well, whoop-de-doo, right? But wait till you hear this one that he wrote for kids. You know, it's a series. It's really, really amazing, and you've never heard this topic for children ever before, I guarantee you. So he's had international bestsellers, lessons learned on compliance and ethics, and you know we're all about ethics around here, and best practices under the FCPA and Bribery Act. I wish somebody would bribe me one of these days, as well as an award-winning series, Fox on Compliance. So Tom, are you ready to screw the commute?
I am.
How you doing, man? I'm
doing great for a Monday.
Oh man, I'll tell you, yeah, we're recording on a Monday. I don't know exactly what day we'll play this, but yeah, you're a busy guy. We've been trying to get this booked for a couple months now, but thanks for coming on. And please, for our small business audience, give us kind of a picture what exactly compliance is. What things does that cover?
Sure. So legal and regulatory compliance covers just that. What are the laws and regulations you have to comply with to do business, whether that's locally in a small town I live in or whether that's internationally. And it's a very, very important part of business today. And more importantly, it can cost you a lot if you do not comply with your legal and regulatory requirements. So there's lots of commentary on it, and I have the only podcast network in that area.
Yeah, when you say network, we're talking about loads of shows, right? Not just a show.
Right. I have 65 shows on my network, wow. 50 of which I host or produce.
My goodness, you're a busy guy. Now, here's the thing, though. You know, I've been in business, I figured out 47 years, something like that, for myself. And people like me consider compliance the biggest pain in the rear end. Now, you have gone opposite and said it can be a profit center. How on earth could that be true?
Because effective compliance equates to greater business efficiency, and that directly impacts profitability and ROI. Properly seen compliance is really financial compliance. I can walk you through the laws over the past 20 or 30 years in that area, but the reality is you have to have financial controls if you're a U.S. public company. And those financial controls form the basis of your compliance program. And if compliance is not the land of Dr. No, or the land of no populated by Dr. No, compliance can facilitate greater business by allowing you to manage greater risks. And the greater the risk is in business, typically the greater profitability of it.
Wow. Never heard that angle on that for sure. In all the years I've been doing business, I'm the older I get, I'm a little less or a little more risk aversive. Do you find that in the businesses you deal with that the younger startups are more apt to go for something crazy than a guy like me?
Well, I started out, I'm a lawyer by professional training, and in the corporate world, there is nothing more conservative than an in-house lawyer. So
Right.
I sort of grew up with that background. And what I saw in compliance was it's risk management. And if you can manage those risks, it allows your company to really go faster. So you have brakes on a car, not to slow down. You have brakes on a car so you can go fast. And that's the same analogy for a compliance program. You have a compliance program so you can take those risks and manage those risks. And if something comes up, you can adjust through continuous monitoring and continuous improvement and move forward quickly and with greater profitability.
Well, now, how did you get into this? Because you even have a nickname like the Compliance Evangelist. How does somebody pick this part of law to go into?
In my last corporate position, I was a general counsel at a company that had violated a major compliance law that deals with U.S. companies doing business overseas. It's called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and it prevents U.S. companies from engaging in bribery and corruption outside the United States. The company had violated that law, and I was part of the.
You mean it's okay in the United States? Come on. They had to have a special law for outside the United States.
There's state laws that deal with that inside the United States.
Oh, there's no federal law?
No federal law inside the United States. The federal law deals with outside the country, and then the state laws take care of it inside the United States.
Are they consistent through the states?
Absolutely not.
So that means a scammer could go to a particular state that's got easier laws to skirt?
Well, for instance, in the great state of Texas, where I live, there is a law on the books that says any benefit to gain an unfair business advantage is a violation of the state's anti-bribery law. Well, I mean, is that a dinner? Is that a baseball ticket?
Yeah.
In California, they have a dollar limit of $1,000. So anything below $1,000 is not a bribe, but anything above to gain an unfair advantage could be a violation of the California anti-bribery law, and really every state's different.
All right, what if let's take California for a second. What if there was 5 different ones under 1,000?
Well, then someone would probably say, let's aggregate those and take it above the 1,000 because that's what your scheme was.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm not moving to California to pull this off. Trust me. Nobody wants to go to California anymore. So how did you decide to turn this into not only a podcast, but 65 shows? I can't imagine. I'm having trouble hosting 3 times a week. So how did you get into podcasting?
So I got into podcasting. I had was the third blogger in the compliance space. I started in 2010 and blogged for a couple of years. And really, podcasting was a natural outgrowth of my social media marketing through blogging. And so I started podcasting in 2012. So I've been doing it for 13 years now.
Yeah. Now, see, I was poo-pooing it at that time because, it was mostly ego-based. Nobody was making any money. So you were pretty much an early adopter there. I didn't get into it until, cars were able to play them from their dashboards and all the in-home devices. There's a billion of those out there now. So I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago when I got into it. But we still did 800 episodes, so we're cranking along. So what were those first podcasts like? I mean, you didn't have 65 in those days, right?
No, I'm embarrassed to look at them now. It was me sitting in front of a computer and a computer camera talking about some topic around compliance. But you mentioned ego. Well, mine was sort of reverse ego because my daughter was then a teenager and her father was decidedly uncool. And so I went to her one day and I said, honey, if I had a show on iTunes, would that be cool? And she goes, a show on iTunes and I can tell people, yeah, Dad, that'd be cool. So, for 30 days, I was decidedly cool to my 14-year-old daughter.
Well, this kind of she's 14 now, but this kind of leads into some crazy. I mean, I say crazy in a nice way. That I never heard a children's book about compliance. Tell us about that.
Sure. So, really, I still can't understand how I let someone talk me into this, but I did. And
It worked
I
out,
met
didn't it?
yeah, I met a guy who published books around what parents did, and it was designed to show their kids what they did. So my dad's an accountant, my mother's a teacher, my dad's a university professor, whatever it may be. And I told him I was in compliance. He says, "Let's do a book on my father's a compliance officer." So I said, "Okay," and we did it. And I was very sheepish about it. It came out 2 weeks before Christmas. I publicized it through LinkedIn. The LinkedIn post went viral, and the week before Christmas, I became the #1 bestseller on Amazon's children's books for careers, which
Wow.
absolutely stunned me. And it turned out a lot of people needed or wanted a way to tell their kids what they did. And the book was so successful, the publisher signed me to a 3-book deal. We just published book 2, which is about speaking up or whistleblowing or reporting, whatever you might choose to call it, and why that is a good thing. And we've got book number 3 coming out, and you'll love this one. The ROI of compliance is awesome.
ROI.
Yeah.
The
So we're going to
kids are
see if
gonna
we can
think
teach
that's a
children
little
about
animal
ROI.
or something. Roy the animal. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have characters in it? What age group is this aimed at?
So 4 to 10, the story is around, I have some friends that are in the dog rescue arena, and
Oh, me too. Me too.
their business is, they call it enrichment training, and they take dogs, rescue dogs, and give them some basic skills: walking on a leash, being around other dogs, swimming, responding to commands, not biting, not running away, kind of all those skills to make the dogs more adoptable.
Mm-hmm.
Their business is called, or organization is called, Pawtastic Friends. So each story is around animal rescue and Pawtastic Friends, and indeed all the profits from the book go to that charity. They have a 503c charity or organization. So it's around rescue dogs, which are one of my passions as well, and compliance.
Wow, that is an interesting combination. Yeah, I've rescued lots of dogs in my day. I raised so much money for this one group. I thought the lady was going to have a heart attack one time when I delivered the check. Yeah, it's wonderful, boy. That's my calling. Also, is taking care of animals. I heard you mention earlier about public companies, but what about us little schmucks that have to? How do we meet the government expectations around compliance?
So let me maybe step back, because the little companies actually, I think, Tom, have as great or a greater opportunity than bigger companies. And it sounds like this is a little bit of your experience, which is I consider myself a small businessman, so I can pivot literally on a dime
Yeah.
when I want to or I need to.
Yeah.
But the podcasting arena gave me a way to literally have a worldwide outreach and touch points with people that has grown into something that is absolutely massive now. And one of the things I really wanted to communicate with you on this podcast is, if you're a small businessman, if you're a one-person shop, you can exponentially grow your business and exponentially grow your reach through exactly what you and I are doing, which is visiting on a podcast.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have a program called How to Be a Great Podcast Guest, where I teach people most guests just want to come on and suck from your audience, but there's so much you can do. But boy, the benefits of it. I mean, they hear me talking about it all the time. You tell them the benefits of being on podcasts.
So the benefits of being on podcast, number one, is you get to tell your story. Number two, you have to tell your story. And why is that important? Because it's your elevator pitch. And every time you tell your story, you refine it down. And if you're out, having a beer, having a burger, in an elevator, meeting people for the first time, and they say, "What do you do?" Well, you've got the message that you can give to them. So that's number one. Number two is, through social media, and you mentioned some of the sites you are on in the introduction to this podcast, you get to touch all of those people. And I'm going to throw some numbers at you that, frankly, even boggle my mind. I get 450,000 social media touch points every month from my network. That is podcasts and all the platforms that you and I distribute on. But that's only half of it. The other half is TikTok, it's Instagram, it's LinkedIn, it's Twitter. So all of those touch points get your message out. And every time one of my podcasts goes out, it goes out to about 20 different social media platforms. And that's how I have this incredible number of touch points in every business. Every marketing, person I've ever heard says it's touch points. It's how many times can you talk to your client, your customer, your potential customer. And the reason I love the podcast format is I think it's the most intimate format. I mean, you and I are having an audio podcast, an audio conversation, and anyone listening, it's like they're sitting and watching us around a coffee table, having a cup of coffee, having a chat. And that's the kind of intimacy that people really respond to in terms of marketing.
Yeah, and not only that, if you're a podcast guest, you're getting a warm introduction to potentially tens of thousands of people on one podcast, hundreds and hundreds of thousands if you do this regularly. And if you're a podcast host on the other side, you're the expert. So it's a way to get millions of dollars of free publicity and sell products and services like crazy. So, yeah. So, and like I think I told you earlier, I used to poo-poo it, but now it's a whole different ballgame out there with all the cars when people aren't screwing the commute. They're in the car stuck listening to podcasts right off their dashboard. And then there's a billion of these in-home devices, Amazon's, Echo and Google Assistant, and they can just say, hey, play Screw the Commute. And it starts playing in their house, all over their house. So yeah, it's a awesome opportunity. Now, what the heck is the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network? What's that?
So I live in a rural part of West Texas called the Texas Hill Country. I live outside of a town called Kerrville of 20,000 people. And I wanted to try and take the business model that I had developed with the Compliance Podcast Network and see if it worked in a rural setting. Because my observation, well, first of all, there's no TV in my little town. The radio is internet, so it's not local. We have a newspaper that comes out 3 times a week. So there's very limited marketing opportunities, sort of the traditional way. And I wanted to see if I could bring a social media marketing mindset to a rural area. I have advertised in the newspaper. I've advertised on the internet radio. So I knew what their prices were. And I could come in and do a podcast at a cheaper dollar point. And what I give everyone who does one of these podcasts, it's not just the podcast, it's the social media marketing content that I create of video clips or audio clips that they can put out on their Facebook page, their LinkedIn page, their Twitter account, and they're small enough that they can send to individual customers if they so choose. So we founded the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network last October, and we've got 1,500 subscribers on our Facebook page.
So let me get this straight. So you're going to rural areas where costs to advertise are much cheaper. And you're doing what? You're advertising your podcast, or you're buying time to do your podcast? What is it?
No, it's not buying time, and actually advertising is not cheap here. So a 1-week ad in our local newspaper is $500.
Yikes!
I'll multiply that times 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You put down some significant dollars, and who is that going to reach? It's going to reach, frankly, older people who read a hard copy newspaper.
Right.
I'm one of them, so I read the paper, but those ads aren't online. So how do you reach your audience? And it struck me that their audience is online, and they're on social media, and they're on Facebook. And so we have a local daily news show on Facebook. And I thought, well, if he can do that for news, why can't I do that for the guy that's got a computer store? We have Our local museum is on there. We have local artists. We have local songwriters. We have a woman who has a cookie store who's on there. And so over a wide variety of what you and I would consider just a local small time business people are getting their message out in a social media marketing way that's going to, frankly, anybody under the age of 50.
Okay, now I get it. So you're basically doing local shows, or they're doing local shows. So, a beautiful way to get business locally for sure. Now let's switch gears here for just a moment. I know you have some opinions on this. How has business changed forever because of this Ukraine situation?
So in the sort of wider picture, if we maybe step back to the global stage, I think business changed forever because of the Russian invasion in several significant ways. Number one was at the international level, there's a much broader awareness of money laundering and how Russian oligarchs laundered money. So the U.S. government increased enforcement of anti-money laundering regulations and went after the oligarchs. And probably the best picture from the early part of the war was yachts steaming off, trying to get away from ports that the U.S. could seize them because these were the oligarchs' yachts. Right. Second is in anti-corruption. As sad as it is to say, the biggest example of corruption was in the Russian army, where the Russian troops couldn't get arms, they couldn't get ammo, they couldn't get food, they couldn't get anything because the military was so corrupt. They just were paid bribes, and the troops couldn't get any sort of supplies. Number three was in ESG, in terms of not environmental or social, but the reputational issues of U.S. companies doing business with Russian companies.
What's ESG stand for?
ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance concepts in a corporation. But people don't want to do business with U.S. companies that were doing business in Russia, and they had to shut down those businesses. And McDonald's is one of the best examples. They shut down all of their franchise restaurants in Russia. Now, whether they sold them to the franchisees or gave them, I don't know, but McDonald's does not have the golden arches in Russia anymore. And so on the international level, it changed. And obviously the supply chain, we can't get supplies or raw goods out of Russia. We're having trouble getting them out of Ukraine because of the Russian blockade. And that's an extension of what happened during COVID. So where are you getting your raw products? That has become much more important for U.S. companies. And then where are you going to sell those raw products? Well, why not sell them here in the United States? It's called reshoring. But if you can sell, and we all experienced during the pandemic, people wanting to do home improvement. And it was difficult to buy lumber just because there was nobody to cut the trees, nobody to process the wood, and nobody to sell it to us. Well, if we could take the lumber that we sold internationally to Russia and resell it in the United States, maybe we could start building more houses. And maybe there's business opportunities in the United States that we didn't focus on before because we didn't have to.
Well, this is kind of, related to the potential conflict with China, right? And supply chain issues. So now, luckily, I've been pushing people for years and years to just sell electrons. We could make a fortune just selling digital products. So during the pandemic, I didn't even notice in my business, but the businesses do need to prepare for this. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely spot on to talk about this in the coming conflicts with China. Right now, it's a pretty severe competition. I hope it doesn't move to the conflict stage, but you can't get silicon chips out of China. And the Biden administration passed the CHIPS Act. Well, China uses slave labor in the Xinjiang region with Uyghurs to manufacture cloth and clothing that's used in clothes sold in the West. And there's a specific law that prevents U.S. companies from buying clothes and other goods made from slave labor out of China.
Yeah, but how hard is that to circumnavigate, I wonder, for these companies?
Well, I think it's pretty difficult for them to, because this law says, actually, Mr. Company, you have to prove your goods are not coming from those regions. So you have to have affirmative evidence documented evidence that you can show to a regulator if they come knocking. So there's some pretty good teeth in that law. And then, of course, we touched on this with Russia, but China is one of our biggest purchasers of goods from the United States, trade back. How are you going to replace those customers, whether you're an Apple, whether you're a car company, whether you're a lumber company? If you're selling raw goods into China to let them process or sell goods into China, how are you going to replace that market if it's not available? And I don't know the answers to all those questions, but I want us and people like you and me to start having these kinds of conversations on places like podcasts, so people start thinking about these and how are you going to comply with U.S. laws in these areas.
Yeah, especially if you're selling any kind of physical goods. I mean, you saw the ships backed up in the Port of Los Angeles back a couple years ago. I mean, 40 ships deep, and everybody's stuff was on there. I was trying to buy some stuff, and they say, well, I don't know when it's going to get here because it's sitting way out in the ocean somewhere. So you got to think about those things. But again, I've been preaching every single business on earth needs to have a digital aspect to it, because that way, even local businesses, like I always tell people, the local ice cream shop could make more money selling an ebook on how to make an ice cream cake than they can with servicing their own area with a lot less overhead. So every business should have a digital aspect to it. So anyway, got to take a sponsor break. When we come back, we'll ask Tom what a typical day looks like for this prolific guy with this giant network. So folks, about 25 years ago or so, I kind of turned the internet marketing guru world on its head, in that people at my level were charging 50 or 100 grand up front. And I knew a lot of these people. You gave them 50 or 100 grand up front, they'd be hiding out in Ukraine because they would rip you off and never help you. So I said, that's too risky. I'm a small business advocate. And I said, I'm going to turn that on its head. So I just charged an entry fee, which was like 10 times cheaper than what they were charging. And I tied my success to your success. So for me to get my 50,000, you had to net 200,000. Well, 1,800 students later, people kind of loved this because they knew I wouldn't disappear on them, and they know what a fanatic I am. I could have quit doing this 23 years ago, and I'm still doing it. So it's the longest running, most successful, most unique internet and digital marketing mentor program ever. And it's all one-on-one with myself and my staff. We don't lump you in with groups that are more advanced or less advanced. You also get a scholarship to the only licensed, dedicated internet and digital marketing school in the country. You can either use it yourself or gift it. It'd be one of the best legacy gifts you ever gave to a young person, because the four-year colleges are nothing more than ripping them off and teaching them how to protest. So this is an actual skill that's in super high demand that they can get in as little as 6 months. So check it out, the whole thing, at greatinternetmarketingtraining.com, and get in touch with me. I'm easy to get a hold of, and there's no machine gun high pressure nest here to trip you up. I'll just help you figure out your future online. All right, let's get back to the main event. We got Tom Fox here. He's an attorney that has a massive network with regard to compliance for business. Also is a children's writer that's helping children get an idea at an early age of the good things they need to do to be successful. So Tom, what's a typical day look like for you? Do you have a morning routine? Do you get up at a certain time? What do you eat? Let's hear about Tom.
So I'm a crack of dawn guy. I'm up between 4 and 5 every day, and I hit it starting then. And I work typically till sunup, which now is about 7.
So you go directly to work then? You don't do exercise or whatever?
I go directly to work because when sunup happens, I walk the dogs.
Okay.
Because I can't. I live out in the rural area and no lights, so I don't want to walk them in the dark.
Got it.
So I walk the dogs, then I hit the gym. And so I'm usually at the gym between 7:15 and 7:30, and an hour to an hour and a half every day at the gym. And then I take a shower and hit the rest of my work day and work till 6.
Now, what do you eat in there?
What do I eat? So I try to have a bowl of fruit or a banana before workout, and then a health bar or something afterwards. I push that down with, probably 8 cups of coffee.
8 cups of coffee. Wow.
Yeah, I try to have 4 before. The first thing I do in the morning is not work, is to get a cup of coffee.
Okay.
I'm a big I'm down from 12 cups in the morning, so I'm down to 6 to 8.
Oh my God. Is
3
it,
before I work out and
it's
3
not,
after
I
I work
imagine
out.
it's not decaf, huh?
It is not decaf.
Do you remember
And
Jolt
then,
Cola? You remember that?
yes.
Yeah, super high caffeine. That's maybe you could only get down to 4 cups if you up the caffeine in it.
I actually have a lot of my podcasts. I tell people it's a virtual cup of coffee with Tom. So I now offer the Compliance Podcast Network coffee. I have a white labeled coffee that I sell as well. So I have a daily news show called the Daily Compliance News, which is a 5-minute wrap up of the top 4 compliance stories from the day before. And it's a cup of coffee with Tom. So a big coffee fan. Then at noon, my wife and I both work from home. So she comes downstairs from her office and we try to have lunch together every day.
Nice.
And then I go back and work the rest of the day. And sometimes that's offsite. And I have a recording studio for my rural podcast network. And I go down there and record a few episodes, or it's producing the podcast that I recorded today. You're number 4. So I recorded 3 this morning that I recorded, and now I'm on your podcast. So we're on number 4 today, and I've got 3 more this afternoon to record.
Well, that keeps you going. I hope you don't get a sore throat. So what's the future hold for you? I mean, come on, only 65 shows in a network. Come on, you could do better.
I can, and I will, and I'm going to hopefully hit 100.
Oh my God.
That's my goal, is to hit 100, to continue to grow the network. One of my charms is, of course, one of my deficiencies, which is I have one switch, and that's an on or an off. I don't have a dimmer. And so when I get an idea, I just do it. So you want to know how you get to 65 shows about compliance, daily compliance, weekly compliance, compliance interviews, roundtable compliance, Sherlock Holmes and compliance, Star Trek and compliance, Star Wars and compliance, Marvel Cinematic Universe and compliance, sports and compliance, great women in compliance.
Oh my God.
So I get an idea and I do it. This summer I did the entire Star Trek, the original series, 79 episodes of trekking through compliance. So I did that. And now I'm doing the entire Sherlock Holmes oeuvre of adventures in compliance stories, the Sherlock Holmes stories about compliance. So then I interspace it with the passion projects. You named 2 of them, the coming conflict with China and how the Russian invasion of Ukraine changed business forever. I've done things. I did a great series on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I did one on the Enron trial. I've won, I think, 23 podcast awards over the past 5 years. So I just have fun. When
do you have time to save the dogs?
We do that in between on the weekends.
All right. So I heard a new book title for kids just a minute ago from you. When I get an idea, I just do it.
When my daughter was 7, she wrote her first book. And at that point, this was like 06, I think. And I said, honey, how did you write a book? And she looked at me and said, Dad, you just sit down and write it. That's pretty good advice.
Oh man, she's going to be something. So tell them, okay, so the website for all these 65 shows is compliancepodcastnetwork.net. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tom.
Okay, compliancepodcastnetwork.net. And tell them where to get the children's book.
So the children's book is Speaking Up is Awesome. The first book was Compliance is Awesome. They are both available on Amazon.com, both in print form and as well as the electronic form on Kindle. So check out one or both of those. The third book will be out of the ROI of Compliance is Awesome in December. And so you can have the 3-book trilogy.
I'm just sitting here, I always see the lighthearted side of things. I'm seeing, Daddy, could you read me a story before we go to bed? Sure, honey. compliance is important.
And it'll be about dog rescue, which is important.
That's good. That's good. I was thinking the three bears. So thanks so much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun and very critical things for business in compliance arena. I never heard that thought about making money because you're complying. That's a cool one. And these children books are going to create some really good kids. I hope that's a triple golden bestseller, because I'm kind of losing the will to live when I see some of the young people coming up nowadays. So hopefully you'll be changing that. So thanks for coming on, Tom.
Tom, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Okie doke, folks. We'll catch you all in the next episode. See you later.